Hello and welcome to another edition of Thick Slices and Deep Cuts. On today's episode, we will be ranking the studio albums of Genesis, but we will actually just be focusing on the 8 studio albums that they released in the 70s. So it's going to focus solely on the 70s of Genesis. So none of the 80s, no Invisible Touch, none of that stuff. We're going to get right past that and just get right to what I consider to be the good stuff. So if I ranked all Genesis albums, the top 8 would just be all the ones in the 70s. So we can just, bypass all of the other things they did. With that said, we'll just go ahead and get right into it. So 8 studio albums in the 70s, and I'll rank them from 8 to 1. So here we go. At number 8, I have 1978's And Then There Were Three, aptly titled, as at one point they were a 5-piece band. Then for a couple albums they were down to a 4-piece, and at this point they are reduced to a 3-piece. So basically, every time they lost a member, they just, they never replaced the members. They just kept moving forward with what they had. And Then There Were Three. I do like this album. It is the I hate to say my least favorite, but it's 8th out of the 8 70s albums. This was the last one they did. This was the one where Steve Hackett, their guitar player, left. I thought he brought a lot of color to the band and good songwriting, so he's not here. The songs are still of quality. Down and Out starts it out. It's heavy. It's got an odd time signature. Phil Collins sounds great on the drum kit. His voice sounds great. Undertow's a cool one. Ballad of Big, Snowbound. Deep in the Motherlode's probably my other favorite track on here. Many Too Many's really catchy. There are a lot of good hooks on this, something that you started to hear a little bit with the 2 albums before this, but really by this point they're really going for the hooks. But there's still just enough of that clever art rock, that proggy kind of thing that we love in the old Genesis. The real tell on this is towards the end. I kind of tune out by about the last, 3 or 4 songs. So at this point, there's nothing heavy. There's nothing even remotely progressive towards the very end. And the final track, Follow You, Follow Me, was designed for the radio, and it sounds like what they would be doing in the 80s. Even though it came out in 78, Follow You, Follow Me, if you listen to that, it sounds completely like something off of that would fit right in with, like I said, Invisible Touch or one of those albums. So, but it is a good album. It would have been awesome if Steve Hackett had stuck around for this and had at least, if not written any songs, at least contributed the color that he always has on guitar. If he just contributed some more depth to this album, it would have been even better. But as is, it's a good album. It's not one I listen to a whole lot, although for this review I went back and revisited it, and it sounds better than I remember, for sure. So at number 8, And Then There Were Three. Okay, at number 7, I originally had this a little bit higher, but again, upon further review and comparing it with a few others, an album I really enjoy. So this just tells you how strong Genesis were in the 70s. 1970, Trespass. So this is the first album of the 70s, and this one is technically Genesis, their second album, but this is where they become the band that we know them to be. Very progressive, just tons of, they had a different drummer, John Mayhew, and they had a different guitar player, Anthony Phillips, for this album. But Peter Gabriel is, on vocals at this point. And they're a 5-piece. Tons of awesome 12-string acoustic and just like Mellotron and Hammond organ, and just a really cool vibe on this album. I don't know if the songwriting was super polished at this point, but it doesn't matter because the vibe and the mood on this is just great. The back half of this album, I assume if you have this on vinyl, the second side, Stagnation, is great. Dusk is this really cool melodic one. There are no drums on that one. The Knife is the heaviest song I believe that they've ever done. It's a classic. On the first half of this, all those songs are quality. I think White Mountain seems to jump to mind as probably the best thing on the first side. But I really dig this album. I mean, again, it's a band that's at the beginnings. These guys were like 19 or 20 when they did this, and they're fairly naive, but it sounds great. And the vibe on this, this is a unique album to their collection. So I wanted to rank this one much higher because I really enjoy it, but I think there are just a couple of albums that are just probably have overall better quality, while still maintaining that good progressive art rock vibe. But so at number 7, I've got Trespass. Okay, at number 6, my original number 7, but it's 1976 or 77, I'm not sure, but Wind and Wuthering. This is the second album after Peter Gabriel left, and the last one with Steve Hackett. And it is a damn fine album. I used to think of this as, it's a good album, but it's not great. And then I listened to it today, and I just realized that every track is of quality. Every track is pushing the progressiveness. Everything sounds great. 11th Earl of Mar is a big opening track. It just sounds great. One for the Vine is a long one, but man, it's just really good, especially in the first half. And then it kind of meanders maybe longer than it should, but it's still an excellent track. Your Own Special Way, okay, I'll admit, I don't care for that song. That was the one they tried to, like a ballady type one, they tried to get, I assume, radio airplay with. Watt Gorilla, instrumental, very cool. Phil Collins sounds great on the drums on this album. All in a Mouse's Night is very cool. It's progressive, and they're starting to put these hooks in their music, which is all they did years later. But Blood on the Rooftops is incredible. Steve Hackett's doing acoustic stuff. It's just the melodies, the way they change chords on this album is just incredible. Unquiet Slumbers for the Sleepers, and then In That Quiet Earth. It's just 2 tracks that basically make one big instrumental. In That Quiet Earth is great. I'm not sure who wrote it, but Steve Hackett is just playing all kinds of soaring and awesome melodies on that one. And then it finishes with another big one, probably the other, maybe it got played on the radio, I'm not sure, but Afterglow. It's a nice outro track to wind the album down, but not light in any way. So while I was going to rank this 7th, I've decided to now rank it 6th. I think it's a heck of an album, and I think it just speaks to the strength of Genesis in the 70s, where you've got Trespass, in my opinion, at number 7, and Wind and Wuthering at number 6. Okay, at number 5, 1976, A Trick of the Tail. So this is the first album without Peter Gabriel. And this one somewhat goes hand in hand with Wind and Wuthering. I always kind of think of those as, 2 albums that are pretty similar to each other. I think this one's just a little bit better because I just think the songs on here that are good, and there are a lot of them, are just, really good. Dance on a Volcano right out of the gate. It's, fairly tricky and heavy and, fairly bombastic and catchy, and Phil, is now the front man, but he sounds good on it. So Dance on a Volcano is a great way to open it. The next track, Entangled, one of my favorite, what I would call a deep cut by the album. Again, I don't believe there are any drums on this, but just good vocal melodies and harmonies and good acoustic playing, and just, the keyboards are just adding like little textures and vibes. It's a very cool song. Squonk, another heavy one that I like. Ripples, a little bit like Entangled, just more good soaring vocal melodies and harmonies. The title track, A Trick of the Tail, is great, and then you end it with an awesome instrumental, Los Endos. So some people might consider this their best thing. I really enjoy it. So A Trick of the Tail is coming in at number 5 of 8. Okay, now we're down to the top 4. Now the top 4 all had the classic lineup of Peter Gabriel, Steve Hackett, Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks. So these 4 had this just prime lineup that could do no wrong. And so My number 4, 3, 2 could all be number ones. These are all just classic albums. I'll try and explain why I ranked them the way I did and why they're so great. But at number 4, 1971's Nursery Crime. This is the first album to feature both Steve Hackett on guitar and Phil Collins on drums. And these guys are like 20 years old when they joined the band. And the classic track right out of the gate, the musical box, it's dynamic, it goes everywhere, but it also has some of the heaviest passages. I mean, they let Steve Hackett just rip away for a while in the middle of the song, and Phil Collins is just stomping at one point. Peter Gabriel's in fine form all over this. Just a great song, one of their great songs, the musical box. The Return of the Giant Hogweed's kind of technical. I mean, right, the opening riff, you just hear how busy their playing can be. The Fountain of Salmacis is the other. So in my opinion, there are 3 classics on this: the musical box, the Return of the Giant Hogweed, the Fountain of Salmacis. Also, Seven Stones is a nice song, probably what you would call a deep cut, kind of overlooked. A few shorter songs, but this is, some people might think of this as their best album. Certainly, it just has an awesome, unique quality to it, just like all of these albums do. So Nursery Crime, incredible album. Again, coming in at number 4 just tells you how strong the catalog is during this decade. So it's got 3 classics, Seven Stones, I don't know, it's a deep cut, but it's a great listen all the way through. So number 4, Nursery Crime. Number 3, I struggled on where to place this. I had it at 4, I had it at 2. I think it's incredible. I think it's a tough listen. It's a lot to absorb, but it's 1974's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is a double CD studio album. It's about 92 minutes long. It's a concept album. There are a lot of strange tracks interwoven between the actual songs. Highly creative. Peter Gabriel, I think, was just driving the storyline on this. By the way, during this era, Peter Gabriel, when they played live, and a lot of people already know this, but he was always dressing up in costumes. On this cover of the 1973 live album, he's wearing some weird triangular trapezoid hat. He was always dressing up, and if you notice, the rest of the band was pretty much always sitting down. So he's in costume standing up, the rest of the guys are pretty much sitting down. So he took his costumes and everything else to a whole new level by this point. I think a lot of people, I've heard a few people just don't quite get it, but I think he's great on this. I think everybody sounds great on this, whether it's the keyboards or the busy bass lines or Steve Hackett on guitar adding things here and there. Phil's ripping away on the drums, and Gabriel sounds great. The title track, Fly on a Windshield, is incredible. Cuckoo, Cocoon, right into In the Cage, Back in NYC, Carpet Crawlers, The Chamber of 32 Doors, and then you get to CD2. You still have weird ones like The Waiting Room, The Lamia, The Colony of Slippermen, just all kinds of totally experimental tracks. This is by far the most experimental album of the 70s for them, so I think that may turn some people away. I just find it fascinating, and my other thought is, maybe it's a little too long for its good, but if you boil it down to from 92 minutes to 52 minutes, you've got just an album chock full of good stuff. And a lot of their classic albums are around that 50-minute mark, so if you reduce this to the 50-minute type albums that they were putting out, this could be the number 1. So at number 3, I've got The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the last one with Peter Gabriel from 1974. Okay, we're down to the final 2, so I really could just flip a coin here. I'm making my choices today, but it could change the minute I'm done with the podcast. At number 2, it feels like a number 1, but at number 2, I'm going with 1973's Selling England by the Pound. This album is absolutely stunning. Dancing with the Moonlit Night to open it, it's just frantic, just furious, busy. Peter Gabriel's just in his prime doing the lyrical wordplay with everything. Just everybody, this band is just hitting on all cylinders. Firth of Fifth is incredible. The Cinema Show is just incredible. Battle of Epping Forest. All these tracks are long and they don't outstay their welcome. They're just so progressive. They're just incredible. So this album has 4 just absolute classics. And then some people like I Know What I Like, which is like like a hit song they were pushing. You know, it doesn't do a whole lot for me, but I don't think it was intended to be big and progressive like the other tracks. More Fool Me, they let Phil Collins sing on this, a little hint of what was to come. But just an incredible album. You know, again, it's got just 4 epic masterpieces on here. You know, I think I told you earlier, Nursery Crime has what I considered 3 epic classics. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, it's hard to determine how many classics there are because it's a bunch of like songs that just all kind of interconnect. It's just a ton of songs that cross-fade into one another for a concept album. So it's hard to look at the track listing of, you know, what do they have on here? 23 songs. It's hard to look through the 23 songs and pick out all the gems because they're all kind of connected to each other. But this one has 4 distinct classics in my opinion. And it's the number 2 one, 1973's Selling England by the Pound. So if you've figured this out by process of elimination, my number 1 is 1972's Foxtrot. You know, this album is incredible from start to finish. And when I was trying to figure out how is this the number 1, well, let's count all the classics. You've got Watcher of the Skies to open it up. Incredible song. Just comes, it's got this mellotron that just holds the chord and then everybody just kind of fades in. It's just incredible. Get 'Em Out by Friday is another great, you know, it's over 8 minutes long. That's another good stomping one, which I actually got into from this live album. They played it on this live album and I was like, what is that? That's catchy. Oh, it's all Foxtrot. Okay. Can Utility and the Coastliners, totally underrated deep cut. And then you've got the mammoth almost 23 minute track Supper's Ready, which is just a monstrous masterpiece. So you've got, in my opinion, you've got 4 classics on here just like Selling England by the Pound. The difference is one of your 4 classics is 23 minutes long. Also, you know, Horizons is a 1.5 minutes of Steve Hackett playing guitar, and that's basically the introduction to the big song. And then Timetable is the other song I didn't mention on this, and that one is also a good song. So I just feel like this has 4 classics. One of the 4 is a mammoth track, and the entire album from start to finish is just an absolute. This is an absolute gem of an album. So that's why I picked it by just a skosh over Selling England by the Pound. But so there you have it. So quickly to re-rank them, you've got at number 8, you've got 1978's And Then There Were Three. At 7, you've got 1970's Trespass. At 6, you've got 1976 or 77's Wind and Wuthering. Number 5, you got 1976's A Trick of the Tail. At number 4, you've got 1971's Nursery Crime. At number 3, you've got 1974's The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. At number 2, you've got 1973's Selling England by the Pound. And at number 1, you've got 1972's Foxtrot. So that is ranking 70s Genesis, those 8 classic albums. And on top of that, just to mention this Genesis Live, I got the vinyl here, but this came out in this is from a recording in early 73 when they were on the Foxtrot album. It's got Watcher of the Skies, Get 'Em Out by Friday, both from Foxtrot. Then you've got Return of the Giant Hogweed and Musical Box, both from Nursery Crime. And then the special thing on here is they do the epic heavy track The Knife from Trespass, but they do it with Phil Collins and Steve Hackett in the classic lineup. So to me, this is a must-have, and it's from the best musical period, you know, in musical history. I've done a podcast about how great 1973 was. So this is from 73. It's incredible. And then the other one, this is my introduction to 70s Genesis, was 1977's Live Seconds Out. So they were Touring, I guess Wind and Wuthering would have been the album that was out, and this is the last thing to feature Steve Hackett. And I think for drums, since Phil had to sing, they brought in Chester Thompson of Frank Zappa, and also Bill Bruford, formerly of Yes and King Crimson, was had some downtime at this point. He guests on a few songs, but you know, the versions of Firth of Fifth and Cinema Show, the Selling England by the Pound classics, the versions on here are absolutely stunning. Squonk from Trick of the Tail sounds incredible. You know, you get The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, the song, an excerpt from the musical box. You've got The Supper's Ready in its entirety, 24 and a half minutes here. And it finishes with more excellence from A Trick of the Tail. You've got Dance on a Volcano, which goes into Los Endos, the instrumental. So, you know, if we were ranking the 70s albums, all 10 of them, including the 2 lives, these would be up near the top, and this might be a number 1 as well, just because of what it covers. But the 2 of these cover basically everything from the first, not everything, but it covers something from the first 7 albums of the decade. So these are great. I feel like along with the 8 studio albums, you need these 2 as well. What else? Oh, and just this is more show and tell than anything. I found this with the cool Genesis logo, the best of. It's not the best of, it's just album 1 is Nursery Crime and album 2 is Foxtrot, and I never saw this version of it with this strange gatefold album cover. It was used for next to nothing at the record exchange, so of course I got it. Of course I did. If there was a 9th best album, I guess it would be this one with a terrible album cover, but it's 1980s Duke, recorded in '79, so I guess you could try to make an argument that it was a 70s album, but you know, it's starting to get less art rock and way more prog, and a lot of the songs kind of sound samey on this, and the keyboards are starting to sound kind of corny. You know, it's starting to get that 80s thing, but it's okay. It's, you know, Misunderstanding and Turn It On Again are the 2 radio hits, but the ones that are proggy aren't really that exciting. They're not that great. Like the earlier proggy stuff was just absolutely incredible. But again, if I had to rank it 9th best, I guess this would be it. Again, another long one for vinyl. You know, these albums were all like 50 to 52 minutes. So, also, you know, if you don't want to buy Duke or the album that came after it, Abacab, which is even more made for the radio, less art rock, you can get 1982's Genesis 3 Sides Live, mostly recorded in '81 on tour for Abacab, and it's got a lot of stuff from Abacab and Duke. In fact, it's pretty much Turn It On Again, Dodos from Abacab, the song Abacab, Behind the Lines and Duchess are both from Duke. Follow You, Follow Me was that pop song from And Then There Were Three, which was kind of a hint of what was to come. Misunderstanding. In the Cage is actually from The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway. It's a medley with Cinema Show and Slipperman. That's kind of a cool track. But the big sell on this is side 4, because it's called 3 Sides Live. Side 4 are leftover studio tracks. Paperlate, you might recall, me and Virgil. I'm guessing they were recorded during the Abacab sessions and just didn't make the album. And then Evidence of Autumn is an excellent song, and Open Door, and these were recorded in '79, and I believe they were recorded during the Duke sessions. How Evidence of Autumn wasn't good enough to make it on this average album is beyond me, but it's cool that I have it here. So even though they changed into the 80s, I think this is still worth checking out. And again, I got it used on vinyl for next to nothing. And then I do have the self-titled one from '83. This came from my dad's collection. That's the only reason I have it, but it does have the song Mama on it. At this point, I'm totally disinterested in what they're doing, although the song Mama is pretty cool. So, and you know, I inherited it from my dad's collection, so there you go. And then I'll speed things up, but just real quickly, when Peter Gabriel left the band in '75, they weren't quite sure what to do. Well, Steve Hackett did a solo album, Voyage of the Acolyte, which is excellent. Total Genesis, just more instrumental. And Mike Rutherford did the bass, and Phil Collins did the drums. So this is sort of what they did for a year while they were trying to figure out what the next move was after Gabriel left. So if you're looking for more '70s Genesis, I recommend checking out Voyage of the Acolyte by Steve Hackett from '75. It's awesome. Shadow of the Hierophant, Ace of Wands, you know, A Tower Struck Down, Star of Sirius, all kinds of good stuff on here. And then Steve Hackett in 2012, he did Genesis Revisited 2, and he brought in like Steven Wilson and Michael Ockerfeld and Neil Morse and Steve Marillion and a bunch of other guests, and they did all kinds of cool Genesis songs and a few Steve Hackett 70s songs from the Voyage of the Acolyte. So it's just all Genesis and 70s Steve Hackett from when Steve was in the band. And they redo these songs, and I think these versions, I hate to say it, but these versions are stunning, and they're in many cases better than the originals, if you can believe that. So this is totally worth owning if you like that era of Genesis. And then just lastly, you know, Genesis Revisited live at Hammersmith, covering that era. You know, Genesis Revisited live at the Royal Albert Hall, covering that era. But there's enough of a differentiation in the set list here to make it worth buying both. And same with this, the Total Experience live in Liverpool. You know, covering his album at the time a little bit from his current album, plus the Genesis classics. So you got it all here. And these aren't the only ones. He's got one called Wuthering Nights, which focuses on wind and weathering. And I think he just either released it or will be releasing one where he pretty much just covers the album Selling England by the Pound live with an excellent lineup. So if you like 70s Genesis, there are all kinds. Steve Hackett is really the curator of that era of Genesis. He does a heck of a job too. So, but there you go. One of the all-time classic bands, Genesis, and we just covered basically the 70s era of Genesis. So, thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned something or found it fairly entertaining, and I will see you next time. Thanks.